All right. Well, this is fun. Sam Mirejovsky here, as you know, the What's Right show here with a special interview with my good friend Riley Lewis. I need to, Riley, you and I obviously have gotten to know each other a little bit in quick segments on your show on OAN, but this is the first time that we're talking. This is nice. I like it. And by the way, we this is all for all of you listening and watching this. This is us, really kind of hopefully getting to know each other a little bit better. So we're glad that you're here for it. Riley, tell us about you. Like, how did you get to OAN? And I guess one of the things I really want to get at for my listeners, my audience, is understanding this new media environment, because it's amazing that there are these upstart conservative media companies that I personally hope are out there stealing Fox News, lunch. And I think you're part of that because you've got a great show on OAN. You're on every day, every weekday, and you're just kicking ass. And you're young, you're conservative, you've got energy, and you're a man to watch. So I guess your background, and then tell us about this new conservative media environment that has really kind of taken off in the last little while.
Would love to. Yeah. So background, born and raised here in San Diego, California, North County, Encinitas, for those who might be familiar. Beautiful place to be. I would not trade that for the world. And I grew up in a very political household. I grew up on people like Rush Limbaugh and Tucker Carlson, among many, many others, Larry Elder and Roger Hedgecock, and so many content creators in that world who had been in large part forced into radio, early days of podcasting, because they were censored. They were attacked by legacy liberal media. And that will segue into our later discussion. But I grew up in politics, and how I got to OAN. I was working in the midterms in 2022 on a congressional race right here in Southern California, in California's 49th congressional district. And that went really, really well, but we came up just a little bit short. So as soon as that was over, I said, I want to stay in politics. I love this world. It's the only thing I want to do with my life, quite frankly. And I had to find a way to stay in this environment, but I wasn't sure if campaigning was really my future. So I thought, let me pivot and go into media, because our candidate at the time had taken lots of interviews, including some with OAN, and they went very well. And I realized that was the right fit for me. So as soon as that campaign was over, I applied for a job and started working here in December of 2022. So less than a full month after Election Day. And from there, it's just been really incredible. I started on a different show as a writer, and then I went to being a producer, and then a booker, and then a guest on the show, and then a guest host for that show. And that went well enough to the point where they decided to give me my own show. I'm very grateful.
Phenomenal. What a trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah. And just special shout out to the Herring family. They own this company, and they are just incredible people who've given me so much opportunity. So just special shout out to the Herrings. They are awesome people, really remarkable. And that brings us, though, to this media question about what's going on with this landscape. Sam, it's revolutionary, honestly, what's happening right now. And I think in the last election, people have finally realized the legacy media is on its last legs. They are slowly fizzling out, especially liberal establishment media. They're running out of talking points. They are no longer relevant. We're moving towards citizen journalism, reporters on X who are bringing information to people directly, and then podcasts like this one. And honestly, I don't know what the legacy media is going to do with this new business model. They are anachronistic and outdated, and they don't understand it whatsoever, and they don't understand what people are looking for. It's about a product market fit. They just don't understand the way people are consuming information these days. And I think the biggest thing, though, you look at the biggest names in legacy media, they have destroyed their own credibility. They have completely destroyed themselves. And the question remains, and this is a question for you, Sam, will these giant, media companies be able to regain the trust they once had from Americans? I don't know if they will, but that's the mission they face right now. They will have to adapt, I think, anyway, but there's a bigger question about whether or not people will even trust them moving forward. Numbers show there's a record low trust in legacy media right now, rightfully so. It's understandable. I just don't know if they're going to be able to make up all the ground they've lost.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because when I was maybe 10 years ago,
Hmm.
I considered, Fox News to be the conservative answer, right?
Hmm.
And I have become so disillusioned as a conservative with Fox, and I think it, obviously coinciding with Tucker's ouster, um,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
which was so shameful. And I don't want to go too far down in that rabbit hole, but I realized at that moment that Fox News was actually part of the blob, and maybe they can rescue it. But what I like is that OAN and I think another maybe competitor of yours is taking a huge chunks, or is working on taking huge chunks out of Fox's viewership with exciting real conservatives. I don't get the idea that OAN tells you what to say or what not to say. um,
Never.
I don't think that it's anything. It's not it doesn't feel corporate. And so what's neat about it is that your product fills that, the person that wanted to tune into a few, newsmakers or news folks on Fox, but really wanted to get the straight story and something that feels more like browsing X than, watching CNN.
Yes.
OAN is the answer. And I think it's phenomenally, I think it's really exciting. And I'll tell you, because I straddle sort of both worlds in the sense that, I'm on my show is on radio, and of course it then turns into a podcast. And I think, candidly, we talk, Robbie and I talk about this all the time. At some point, we don't need terrestrial, right? And it's part of it's old world. There's all these rules. There's things you can and can't do. I'm always getting corporate emails from Odyssey, mad at me for something. And, my audience wants to straight me. And, the audience wants to straight you. And the more filters that are placed between, opinion makers and their audience, I mean, it's a lose-lose for everybody. And so I think, I admire what you're doing tremendously. And I admire what OAN is doing and all the great voices. I mean, you have some phenomenal people on there. And for everybody listening and watching this, if you aren't if you aren't watching OAN, start immediately, and just be prepared to not want to watch Fox afterwards. Just saying. Um, how do people, to a newbie, how do they watch OAN? Where do they find it?
Dish, Sling TV, OAN Live, Cloud TV. We try to push as much traffic through the OAN Live app. We have video on demand, so you can watch all of our stuff, all of our talk shows. So we do talk shows from 3 p.m., starting with my show, Real Story with Riley Lewis. And then we have Hour of News, and then we have Real America, Matt Gaetz, Fine Point with Chanel Rion, and then back to news, which goes on for 18 hours a day. We're doing live news here all around the clock, and it's really remarkable. It's stories that the legacy media, they don't touch. They don't care to touch these stories. Like you said, it's all pre-planned, controlled, coming from the top. That's radically different to the model here. And I think people really respond to that very well, because what we have here is not everyone shares the exact same viewpoints on everything. We talk about tons of issues, but we're all in pursuit of the truth. These are American patriots, just regular folks who have families to feed, lives to live, and they care about their country. That's really the agenda, trying to get to what's really going on with America, especially in such a pivotal moment in our country's history. So I think the common denominator that sort of brings all these people together, whether it's talk show hosts, producers, writers, bookers, newsroom anchors, is this, honestly, a sense of patriotic duty. Maybe that sounds a little bit cheesy, but I really do mean that. There's an obligation, a sense of people are compelled to do this. Everyone here is mission driven. That's the bottom line. We are one American news network, one nation, one team, one family. And I think that people really pick up on that because it feels organic, and it is. It's completely authentic. So people can think what they want. I'm not trying to tell anyone what to think or what to believe, but I deeply care about the truth and what's real. And we live in this time where there is so much information warfare and propaganda constantly being dispelled, in large part by legacy institutions. And they get away with it. They don't make retractions. They do it unapologetically. And you have to fight back against that. So we are in kind of a struggle between what's really going on and the narrative. which is driven by an agenda. There's an agenda behind every single narrative you're going to hear in legacy media. And once you understand that, the way you consume media completely changes.
Yeah, the reason I'm nodding to that is because I for so many years I think I was I'm just not I would tell people, look, I'm not a conspiracy theorist because I just don't kind of let my mind go there. I sort of tend to think that certain secrets are hard to keep, particularly in Washington. So, I don't look for the deeper meaning. And the older I get, the more now, thanks to X, you're hearing from people who have inside knowledge, who are coming forward, and all of a sudden you go, okay, well, this is what I was saying. The secrets are no longer being kept; they're out there, and they're happening now. By the way, because one of the things that's I think one of the true legacies of this Trump 2.0 administration will be that there's finally going to be some cover for people to come out and to speak truth. But the legacy
Yes.
media just kept a lid on everything, and if you questioned it, you were called a wacko. And even people like me who had questioning minds were like, yeah, that's a bridge too far. And the reality is that our government is really not a good actor. There's good people in the government, but there are people who now you see all the stories about what Doge is uncovering, all the wasteful spending. You're seeing what the
Yes.
what the intelligence services have been up to over the years. And I mean, JFK is just the start of it. I mean 9/11, it turns out that the people who were labeled for many years conspiracy theorists were more right than CNN, Fox News, and the Washington Post, New York Times all put together. And that to me is going to be there's an awakening coming, and you're
Yes.
tip of the spear. OAN is part of that. And again, I mean, for those of you who are skeptical right now, if you know me, I'm a very measured, reasonable person, and I think that there's a lot out there that's going to come out, and I think it's going to be one of the important things, but part of this Trump's legacy. And speaking of that, looking at this incredible administration, I have my strong thoughts on Trump 2.0 versus 1.0. What do you think is now 100 days in, with Trump, what does he need to do this term? What is, like, in your mind, you're a patriot, conservative, maybe this is the administration we've all been waiting for. Here we are. What's the thing that has to happen, right, to save America? Like, what's the thing that Trump has to do to save us?
So I guess I would start by saying I think I know exactly what the problem is that he's facing, and this is the problem that any future president would face as well. The American people, by and large, this is a generalization, but by and large, the American people have lost a lot of control over their own government and over their own country. I think a lot of public servants in Washington have forgotten that they work for the American people, and they've taken on their own political agenda. And I would specifically say that applies to Doge and the fact that we have hundreds and hundreds of federal agencies with their own staffing, their own funding, and they're run by unelected bureaucrats who operate with very little government oversight and even less oversight from voters and taxpayers themselves. And that's what Doge has uncovered. It's, call it corruption, call it mismanagement, waste, fraud, abuse, whatever it is. The American people need to get back into the driver's seat. And I think Trump came along in 2016 and was so revolutionary as he came down the escalator, leaving the elites of DC and coming down to meet the people where they were in a very grassroots way, showing us that what we face more often than not is, it's like Reagan once said, the government doesn't solve problems, it subsidizes them. I think that's true in many cases, and I think we've seen that now. So the question is, I think the biggest thing, I guess, for Trump to do is try to get the Doge cuts codified into law. We need a renormalization. We have to look at permanent Washington and turn over every single stone. We need to know what our own government is up to. And from there, it's up to the American people, honestly, to save their own country. One man can only do so much, especially when given 4 years, and especially given everything he's been through and all of the attacks on him. So I think we have to be cautious here to make sure we don't put all the eggs into that basket, because looking at 2028 and beyond, it's up to the American citizens, people like you and me, Sam, honestly, to get involved, get into politics, run at the local level, talk about these issues. We have to take ownership of our own country again. That's the big problem I see facing us today. And I know we don't all always agree with each other, but we're all we've got, and America really is the final frontier. This is the core pillar of Western civilization. And if America falls, the rest of it falls, truthfully. So that's the way I see it. I could be wrong, but I feel very strongly about that. I do.
Yeah.
So I think codifying Doge cuts would be one of the best things he could do, and minimizing looking at the spending problem and the out of control rogue bureaucracies that look at DC and say, well, presidents come and go, elections come and go, but we're here for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and we're going to do what we want anyway. That is an attack on the will of the people, the sovereignty of the American voters, and in large part, it's been happening without our knowledge. So this is kind of a revolutionary moment that we're in right now, quite frankly, and I just don't know how it's going to work out in the end.
Yeah, the reality is the reality is, right, that you know, the we have to remove the profit incentive in Washington from the you know, from the politicians that are there to go along and get along, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because I think one of the huge takeaways for me from what we've discovered so far in less than 100 days is that, you know, these guys in DC, they draw $190,000 salary, but then it's the mother-in-law, it's the brother-in-law, it's the friend, it's the cousin that ends up, you know, with these $10 million payouts, you know, through an NGO to an NGO to another NGO. Mm-hmm. And so they're all going there getting rich. And consequently, Republican and Democrat, by the way, they don't want to rock the boat. Meanwhile, the deep state, the bureaucracy is taking away our freedoms, and it's been incremental, but it's been steady.
Yes.
You know, this is really an enemy to, this is really, this is a danger to all Americans. I like what you said about that. It's not really a Republican or Democrat issue. And that's why the Dems are trying to, you know, to agitate so much and polarize people so much, you know, in respects to Elon and Doge and Trump, because I think if Trump is able to pull this off, I think he wins over Republicans, yes, of course, the right, the center, and possibly even fringes of the center left. Because if he can revitalize, you know, the American economy, if he can bring a balanced budget, if he can actually take a little cut out of the national debt, and at the same time, you know, repatriate, you know, industry into the U.S., I think that's going to be a political movement that it's going to be very tough to beat. Yes. You know, and then you combine with it where we started, you know, our conversation, which is the media landscape, and all of a sudden, I mean, again, imagine all that happens. How does CNN explain that that's bad? Right? Like, tell me that like I'm stupid, right? How does CNN spin that?
Yeah. Well, I guess
they'll try.
They will try, and it's weird to me to see them double down on that, because I honestly think there is to come full circle, I do think there's a chance that, because the American people are very forgiving, and I think that they would like to be able to trust institutions of all kinds. I used to trust all the institutions blindly as a kid because I thought the U.S. government, U.S. media, this is a good country. I still firmly believe that, and it's got a lot of amazing people. So I figured all of our institutions and entities are all just fundamentally good too. And I think that's the thing, is people have had that awakening, like you said, but there's also been a mobilization. People are leaving with their eyes and their feet and their dollars, finding new sources of information. And now it's a problem for these entities that are businesses at the end of the day. So it's weird for me to see them doubling down on a losing game, and isolating people and alienating people. And I don't know what they're going to do, but I would say that big picture, the thing that just really concerns me, whether it's Fox, CNN, MSNBC, NBC, whatever it is, lies and propaganda and misinformation is tearing the American people apart more so than anything else. I think that's really the source of polarization and division, and even some instances of political violence now that we were just talking about the other day on my show. People are getting violent and restless, and it takes a lot of forms, but I get the sense that we're kind of bubbling up towards something bigger happening in this country. I don't know, but I think the media is by and large responsible for it, and in large part. So I don't know what they're going to do, honestly, with you, Sam. And I don't know if they can even. They might just be better off to try to start over at this point. Quite frankly, there's so much baggage and so much explaining and twisting to do, and that's the thing about liars that I've learned in my own personal life. They just can't keep the lies straight. They have to keep inventing new information, try to keep their story straight, and eventually it just falls apart. It's like a tangled pair of headphones, and they just don't know where to begin. So maybe it's just best to buy a new pair.
Do you think that maybe some of the these manifestations of violence, right? Be it people running around keying Teslas, or attacking Trump supporters or whatever. You think that do you think that this maybe is just is a realization that is spreading, like there's just a futility of it all? Because when you said, I love what you said, that these the lies are they're getting so tangled up that people can't keep them straight anymore. There were so many lies told about the viability of Biden's and then later Kamala Harris's campaign,
Yes,
that has led to a psychological break. And I should have said this on your show, because it would have been the best answer to the psychological break for so many leftists that were so invested. And of course our side's going to win. And of course we're winning. And of course, oh my gosh. And it was all smoke and mirrors. And then when Trump won, it was in some ways almost worse than when Hillary Clinton was bested by him in 2016, because they were even more invested now in the story. And, so, but what a loss of credibility for every person that carried water on that, right?
Yes. Well, and they of course, after it's all over, they come out with a report. I forget which outlet came out with it, but they of course they come out because, like you said, it was so, you don't have to be an expert with this stuff. You don't have to be a media analyst to clearly see Joe Biden was not fit physically or mentally to be president.
Right.
On top of it all, by the way, special counsel Robert Hur coming out and saying, well, federal prosecutors could theoretically charge him for certain offenses, but they're not going to, because he's just not fit to stand trial. But he's fit to run the military and to hold the nuke codes and to run this whole country. I think that was the moment that really turned a lot of people off. And then, of course, still sticking with Biden through a primary election just to turn around in the 11th hour and force him out of the race to then install Kamala Harris. I think that really turned off a lot of Democrats too, and rightfully so, because that was not democracy at all. And I'm not a Democrat voter, but I imagine that would make you feel basically worthless at that point, like your opinion doesn't really matter. It was a total power play, and it was a complete betrayal of their base. So I think
every
that
Democrat
among other moves,
Democrat I know, I think you're speaking from that experience as well, is none too pleased about how that all went down. It's indefensible, really.
Yes.
And
but then though, to put out that report saying, we all 51, administration officials from the Biden White House all coming out months after the election's over saying, turns out that we knew he was totally not fit for office and we covered it up. I mean, tell us something we don't know. It's like, who do you think you're helping with that kind of a report 2 months after the fact?
Yeah, it's reminding. Well, it's Jake Tapper, and it's like there hasn't been a greater book come out. What I was joking since OJ wrote "If I Did It," he was part of the cover up. It was him. I mean, it was Tapper who would tusk and shake his head, and we don't know that. You can't say that.
Yeah.
When he was, he saw it firsthand. He was absolutely aware, and for political reasons covered this all up, and forever to his shame.
Yeah, well, that's the sad thing, really. At the end of the day, it's good for us. I think this election could have been a lot closer had they made certain moves. I mean, but even still, sticking with Biden throughout it all and being blindly allegiant to him, that kind of blind loyalty is going to cost you the loyalty of your own base, because eventually it's painful. I mean, Biden made so many physically painful policy decisions at home and abroad that cost people a great deal, especially the border. They got innocent Americans like Laken Riley killed by letting millions of people pour in this country, including thousands of people with violent criminal histories. There is no way to spin that. There really is no way to justify that. And I think people on both sides of the aisle, even Bernie Sanders came out recently and said, well, I do agree with Trump about securing the border because illegal immigration isn't appropriate. when Senator Sanders is the voice of reason in your party, you're in big trouble because this guy is a full on communist. So that's pretty insane to me.
Yeah. Well, well, speaking of Congress, you have obviously experience running a congressional campaign, and so with that experience, let's look forward. Unfortunately, less than 2 years. These midterms are going to be enormously important because they will decide really the fate of the final 2 years of Trump's presidency. What advice do you have for Republicans? What do we do to win this?
First of all, first key takeaway from the win in 2024: step up the ground game. We cannot get complacent. We cannot rest on our laurels. We need to be pounding doors, pounding the phones, raising money, uniting behind the America First candidates that will, continue to help this administration with their agenda. We have to be unapologetic about it, and we have to be widespread. And in the last election, we saw 89% of counties in this country shift to the right. We cannot let that go to waste. We have a golden opportunity here to, really, really make a real shift in this country to get it back on the right track. So the ground game is critical. That's been the biggest issue for Republicans in the past. That was something we struggled with in 2022. And I loved in 2024 that people like Scott Pressler and Charlie Kirk
Yes.
were hitting the pavement every single day, morning, noon, and night, 7 days a week. So that's what I think is the key to keeping the momentum going.
What do you think? Do you think that the Republican Party and have they embraced Scott and Charlie enough? Because to me, I mean, look, I'm a layperson in this respect. I'm an outside observer. To me, it seems that between what Pressler is doing, what Kirk these guys are doing better with ground game than the Republican Party has ever done in my lifetime.
Yes.
And I'm a business guy. I'm an attorney. I've got a law firm. I've started businesses. I've sold businesses. If somebody is performing a certain function that your business is doing and they're doing it externally, you know where I'm going with this, right? It's kind of a no-brainer. You literally outsource that, right?
Yes.
To that efficient unit. Are they doing that? What have you heard?
What I see is a very big split in the party between the sort of establishment rhinos you were talking about earlier, people that more often than not do go with a uniparty establishment. They'll go against Trump and their own voters, and they'll go with Democrats on a lot of issues. But then there is a fair group of people, a growing group in the Republican Party that is more outspoken, that is embracing them. So I think that's the biggest thing. Is in a weird sense, on some days it seems like Trump has two opposition parties. Other days, it doesn't seem like that's the case, but I think that's the biggest thing. Is there is a sort of internal battle happening within the GOP, and there are some people that are all on board with it, and they're very supportive, and we are getting some election results. But then there are some that just take it for granted or don't see the value or actively want to work against that. And I think we learned about that in the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin that just happened a little while ago, because that was a very contentious race, one of the most expensive judicial races in U.S. history. I think that Brad Skimmel could have won it, and he didn't. Unfortunately, to Susan Crawford, he lost, and that's very sad. He was very graceful about it, but I think that was a lost opportunity, and I think that speaks to the fact that some Republicans in that area may have gotten complacent, which is you're battling inertia. That's what they've done historically, and so we need people like Scott to keep moving the payload forward, or else they'll fall right back to that playbook.
He's the future of the party. Like that. That's just, it is. And I, but here's, and this from running a campaign, right? You've got the consultant class. Yes. And, forget the elected rhinos. It's this consultant class, and these people are the biggest morons. I mean, and there's, they know that they're going to make a certain amount of money, and they're not all idiots, but they're very self-interested. They're going to make their money.
Sure.
And I remember, like Cernovich talking about this with the races in Orange County. Now, I'm originally from Orange County, lived in Irvine for many years, and so I know the candidates, right? And they're, this was the cycle that they could have won. They could have won in Orange County, but they didn't. And, so what Cernovich was saying is basically that he would offer his services, and the guy is a master wordsmith and a great communicator, huge following, offering his services to the campaign. The campaign's like, I don't know why we're doing. I got to, kind of rebuffed him, and he's like, fine, you don't need my help. I got better things to do. I got a business to run and kids to take care of, and kind of, and unbelievable, right? And my thinking is that and maybe I'm wrong, so you tell me. My thinking is it just didn't fit into the consultant's formula, and it wouldn't have been a line item that they could charge the campaign for, and so they just kind of like pushed it off to the side. Am I right about that?
Oh, completely. 100%. And it's unfortunate that they've sort of turned that into a business. And I get it. These campaigns everyone needs money. The campaigns need money. The politicians need money. I understand that. But at some point, you've put that above the people. And what really is more important to me, just grab a notebook, write down some key issues, and go knock doors yourself. Honestly, we need to focus. We need a complete paradigm shift away from that world. And I just don't know if we're going to see that. But that's really the secret sauce, I think. I think you hit that nail on the head. I really do. And it's sad to hear that, honestly, because those kinds of influencers that have real platforms, they've tapped into something. And the left sees that. They're losing their minds over that. Look, they're out there saying, where's our Joe Rogan? Well, first of all, Joe was a progressive for a long time, but you guys kind of radicalized him with your insane policies. So that's,
Right.
That's kind of ironic. But number two, we should be embracing those influencers, people with real platforms that other people trust in. I mean, these are kind of sages online that have garnered this special power that you're not going to find anywhere else. And it would really serve us well to tap into that for so many reasons. And it's sad to see a lot of people shoo it away. They don't want to accept that that's the world, but you can't just make change go away. That's the future. It's the present, but it's definitely the future.
Right. I mean, this is like, you're just insisting on the horse and buggy when the automobile has already, left the factory floor and people have adopted it. Right. And so to me, I think the Republican Party is infested with just kind of traditionalist thinking and all of these, groups that are, looking to make money off of it. And we got to win. You don't got nothing if you don't win. And this election, I mean, I have to tell you this, but I'm just for the sake of people watching and listening. If the Democrats win the House and we get, Timu Obama, Hakeem Jeffries, who is a moron, if he becomes Speaker of the House, the Democrats will investigate the living daylights out of the Trump administration and stall the next 2 years out. Done.
Yes.
And I don't, it doesn't matter what happens in the Senate. He's not going to get impeached, but it's just not good. So a lot is riding on this. And, and I'm glad that, Ronna McDaniels is out, Lara Trump's in. I don't know if you went to Milwaukee. I was there. It was a great convention. I thought very well run, orchestrated, on message. She deserves credit for that. But the ground game, my God, it's just the old playbook doesn't work. You can't flyers. Who gives a rip about fly? You got to get people to vote. You got to get them registered.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. I don't want to give too much credit to leftists, but I will give them this. They're very good at organizing. They're very effective. You look at these Tesla protests. One day, some legacy headline coming out about Elon Musk is trying to take away your Medicare or your Social Security, and all of a sudden they have hundreds, if not thousands of people, maybe paid, maybe not, whatever, organized, mobilized. They're attacking things. They've got signs. They're chanting. They're in the nation's capital. Look at these hands-off protests happening. 50 states, swarming state capitals. They've been doing this since the 1960s. I mean, we're really getting into like the Obama era level organizing in Chicago kind of stuff, which is the roots of the modern Democrat Party. Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky. And they've mastered the art of organizing in this country. And Republicans, this is the first time I think ever that they've actually started to mash that a little bit. We're not nearly where we need to be. But in this last election, it showed me we are capable of a ground game. We're capable of organizing and mobilizing. You got people from barbershops in the Bronx. You got Amish people riding their wagon trains to the poll places. I never thought I would see something like that. That's really incredible. Yeah. So I just don't want to see them in typical Republican fashion drop the ball when they finally work so hard to get it. We've been waiting for this moment for a comeback like this politically for the better part of a decade, if not longer. And this really, I think, is America's last stand. So even bigger than 2026's midterms, if you want to get this country back in order and really bring it back to the American people and take the power away from these corrupt institutions and put it back into the hands of the voters, then you have to mobilize morning, noon, and night, 7 days a week. That process should be starting now. They should be campaigning for the midterms right now as we're speaking, because they will be here very quickly. And like you said, Sam, there is a lot riding. The whole country's future is riding on that election, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it's hyperbole at all. I think it's very
Look,
real.
after everything I saw, maybe it sounds, because if it does sound hyperbolic, just I wasn't always this. This sense of urgency here comes from everything I saw under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. The mass censorship, the mass illegal immigration, the political violence, the lies, and the lawfare against Trump, getting Trump convicted in a kangaroo court in Manhattan thanks to an openly biased DA who promised to indict him on the campaign trail. And they never even agreed what this underlying crime was. I mean, these people care about one thing only: power. And so everything the left says and does is about getting their hands on more power. I don't think it's about principle. Maybe it is for some of them, but I think by and large it's a power game. And as long as they're in power, then a lot of people in this country aren't safe because they will abuse it. So I really do think that this is a battle between broadly maybe the good guys and the bad guys, and the good guys have won for now, but it's a never-ending fight. And so I would hate to see us work so hard to get into this place just to throw it away after a couple of years. Truly, because all the work from people like Charlie, Scott, ourselves, you and me, it's like, what was it all for? If they just let this moment slip through their hands. So do not waste this golden opportunity. Please get going right now and fight like your country depends on it, because the future of this nation really does.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I hope Riley, we can continue these conversations and have another time to sit down, because I like you, I grew up on Rush and Larry Elder, the sage from South Central. I got my start on KBC, and so I know Larry, and I feel like we've got a common background, and I want to talk more as this administration, as things unfold here, and as we get closer to the midterms. I think every election here, step by step, we got to take it one at a time, is going to be pivotal. And then 28 is going to be, obviously, is going to be huge. Yes. So I know there's a lot to cover, but I know we got to mind the clock. So, Riley, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been nice to talk to you, and I hope we can do this again.
Yes, thank you for having me on. And if I can, really quick, shameless plug, Real Story with Riley Lewis, OAN, Monday through Friday, airs at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern. That's the first talk show in our lineup. Then we have Real America. Then we have Matt Gaetz' show, which is incredible. Fine Point with Chanel Rion, and then back to live news.
I love it. And how do people find you on socials?
They can find me at Riley Lewis 760 on Instagram, Facebook, X, and all the rest.
Yes, that's your area code there in northern San Diego County, right?
Yes, sir.
And you guys survived the great earthquake the other day, yes?
The studio was shaking a little bit, but we survived it.
Well, I saw a video of the elephant circling around their baby. I knew it was serious. So maybe a sign of things to come politically. Hopefully we do protect our own, and we do come out of this cycle stronger than ever. I certainly believe that. Riley Lewis, thank you for joining the What's Right show. Great to have you.
Thank you, sir.